Welcome back to the Tech Talks Daily Podcast, a place where we demystify complex technologies every day and provide real-world examples of how technology is transforming businesses and reshaping entire industries. But we do all this in a language that everyone can understand. And today, I want to encourage everyone to think differently about rebuilding privacy and security. Because let's face it, on an almost weekly basis, maybe even daily basis sometimes, privacy breaches in the Web 2 space are becoming more and more prominent. We've all seen the headlines when we're doom scrolling down our phones, and the question has to be asked, maybe the old way is no longer fit for purpose. We can't keep having the same breaches with the same approaches to try and stop them and expecting different results, right? So this got me thinking, is decentralizing office suites and decentralizing communication platforms such as email, is that the answer? And that's what I want to talk about today and hopefully demystify some of the complex technologies that make that possible. And to do that, Andrew Milch from Skiff is going to be joining me on the podcast today. He's going to be sharing the story behind Skiff, how they're encrypting users' data before it ever leaves their device, and also ensuring that all sensitive information from everything from document titles to email content is kept private to creators and intended recipients and never shared with a third party. So we'll talk about all this and also the advantages of transitioning to a fully private storage platform that is censorship resistant, decentralized and encrypted end-to-end. But before we start today's interview, I just wanted to give a quick mention to our sponsors, because this month the podcast is brought to you by Flipper, which is the #1 marketplace to buy and sell online businesses and startups. So, do you run your own online business? And have you ever considered selling your website, your store, your tech, or your app? Because with world-class combined matching technology, dedicated brokers, and end-to-end services, all at the most efficient price, Flipper is making it simple to sell your online business. So, to get a free valuation, visit my friends at flipper.com/techtalks. where each month thousands of online business owners exit with Flipper. Again, visit flipper.com/techtalks. So no matter where you're listening in the world, buckle up and hold on tight, because it's time for me to beam your ears all the way to New York, where Andrew's going to join us today. So a massive warm welcome to the show. Can you tell the listeners a little about who you are and what you do?
Absolutely. Thank you very much for having me. So my name's Andrew Milch. I'm one of the co-founders of Skiff. We do end-to-end encrypted private email, collaboration, calendar, and a workspace. So imagine rebuilding all of the consumer products we use to communicate, like Gmail, Outlook, to work together, like Docs and Drive, and to share events and schedule meetings, but rebuilding them to be completely private. So your data is only accessible to you. We collect no personal information about your events, your documents, or even, you on sign up.
Wow, that's a big problem to go after. So I'm curious, if I was to take you back in time, can you remember where your passion for tech came from, or how the worlds of technology and privacy would collide for you, and ultimately the moment that would put you on this path you're on right now? Or as they say in those movies, what's your origin story?
Well, it's a great question. Well, I'll say generally, I think, privacy is something that I think is affecting more people's lives. If you're just an internet user, you've probably used services that send you advertisements or collect information about you. I know in the UK, there's decades of, investigatory powers legislation and, a lot of discussions on what can and should be collected by companies and governments. For me, I've been a computer scientist and a programmer my whole life. So since I was very, very young. And I got more and more interested also in just being, a participant in, traveling and international collaboration and affairs and engineering. So I spent some time in Asia and Russia and, Eastern Europe, and places where, you start to work with people who are using secure email, secure messaging, secure communication products. And so, as an engineer, I just couldn't find, this was the most interesting problem I had ever worked on. How can you build great consumer products that are also private? And I think we all just understand intuitively that privacy means a lot to us, like what data is known about us, who's collecting it. And so I don't know if that, if you feel an intuitive response to that, but it was the most exciting problem I had ever worked on. And so that led to just many years of building our products.
And yeah, it was a moment like that would eventually put you on this path, and a path that would lead you to Skiff, which, as you said a few moments ago, is a privacy-first, end-to-end encrypted and open source mail collaboration and drive. But can you tell me more about the story behind the company and possibly expand on the scale of the problem with email in particular that you set out to solve?
So I think the genesis was just realizing, this was actually in very early 2020. So as we entered the pandemic, collaboration became remote. I was personally working with people around the world, and you're relying on these crutches and, 20, 30, actually emails about 40 years old. So communication systems that were built to be efficient and reliable, but not to be private. And so now, this has led to billions of people using these products. But your data is still basically sent in plain text. So you send an email to, Gmail, and Google has access to that data, and whoever else might be, involved in sending or receiving that. The same is true of basically every other large email provider. So basically, I was personally affected by this and realized that it was probably a large problem. Every company is remote in some ways today, using Zoom, using Google Meet or Teams or Slack. And this kind of level of encryption and privacy and data collection is a very intuitive problem. Every company thinks about where their corporate communications are going, where their external data is being stored, is their client data encrypted? And the stakes of a breach are incredibly high. So I think, at Skiff, I wanted to start by building really kind of uncompromisingly secure products that are also very easy to use, particularly for collaboration. And then I started working with our co-founder, Jason, whose parents, came to the US via secure communication. And Jason is a product designer as well. And then, I'm sure you've heard this part of the story many times, but you go from just a product, some initial users, an initial prototype, to actually building something that thousands of people could sign up for, hiring some people to work on it and getting to where we are today.
And there's so much talk at the moment about Web3, and I'm curious, why do you think there are so many privacy breaches in the Web2 space at the moment? Is it just because we're ready to move on to that next thing, or is it something more than that?
Yeah, I think the basis of it is that people's personal information is extremely valuable, no matter who you are. If you're a tech company, it's valuable because you might sell it for ads. You might train machine learning models on that data. If you are a malicious hacker or scammer, you can sell that information to other people. You can steal people's identity. You can steal their bank accounts. And so I think there was just this default practice of basically collecting as much information as possible, writing really long terms of service, and then hopefully making sure that it's secure. And I think the reality is that a lot of companies, either a couple categories here. One is they couldn't keep their hands out of this cookie jar, where they kept developing, sell more information, share more information, collect more information. And there are many in that category. And then also just ones that couldn't quite cut it on the security bar. And so they, maybe unlike a Google, which has tens of billions of dollars to spend on that kind of security problem for all of their Gmail users, smaller providers and companies just don't have quite the budget or the talent. So those are my thoughts. But, it's changing every day.
To bring this to life, if we enter a typical workplace here, can you expand on how actually decentralizing office suites and communication platforms such as email can be used against, used as a weapon against attacks? Because it's a completely different mindset, and it's quite refreshing to hear. But for people that are hearing about it for the first time, can you just expand on that?
Yeah, that's a really great question. So when we talk about privacy, decentralizing data ownership is one piece of that. And so one element is actually building in end-to-end encryption, which means no one else except you can read your messages, your emails, your files, or your documents. For that to be possible, you have to own your own encryption keys. So Skiff, as a company, can have access to those keys. And so that's this first element of decentralization, where you own your own keys. Another element that we think a lot about is the storage element as well. So we've integrated with some optional decentralized storage providers, one called IPFS, which also lets you store some of your data encrypted but decentralized. So if you add your data to this network and you later want to access it outside of Skiff, like you write a program to access it, or you want to back it up yourself, we basically don't have to be the only way for you to access your data. Does that make sense?
Yeah, 100% with you. And for that business leader or decision maker that's listening, what would you say the main advantages of transitioning to a fully private storage platform that is things like censorship-resistant, decentralized, and encrypted end-to-end? What would the key advantages for those business leaders be?
Definitely. I think the first is just general peace of mind and trust. No one else has access to your information except you. You're not Skiff, not any network provider. You never have to worry about that. The second is just a significantly more downside protection. So if that information, may be involved in a lawsuit or client communications or, NDAs, you never have to worry that some third-party company or service provider used by a company would be involved. So, if you're using some unencrypted, PDF sender or provider, they have their privacy policy, and their data storage will have a privacy policy. In Skiff's case, you can just trust that no one else has access to any of your information.
So how does it all work? Can you possibly walk me through how Skiff is, from what I was reading, it's encrypting users' data before it ever leaves their device, and maybe, bring everything to life with a use case. Is there anything you can share around that?
Absolutely. I think that's exactly how end-to-end encryption works, and the value it gives to people. So when you sign up, the first step is, like I mentioned a little before, creating those encryption keys that only you have access to. So you sign up, you create an account for, Andrew and my family's workspace. And so from there, right when my account is created on my device and my device only, those encryption keys are generated. And then anytime I upload a document or a file or a note, or I send an email, those encryption keys are used to encrypt that email when it goes out, or decrypt emails that are getting sent to me in an encrypted format. And so, let's say I'm filling out medical records for a doctor's appointment, which I did very recently. I can put down my, Andrew at skiff.com, which is actually one of my emails. And, I'll get a medical form, and Skiff will never have access to that form. I'll fill it out and I'll send it back. And Skiff, as the service provider, will still never have access to it. So even if you had access to Skiff's database, the network traffic, anything else, you would never see any of that data put in that form.
And it sounds like you would be perfect for a lot of regulated industries. But I'm curious, who are you aiming Skiff at? Are there particular industries you're aiming your services at?
Definitely. Today, we have a lot of users who just personally and intuitively care about privacy. Yeah. A lot of companies and individuals who work in anything crypto or cryptocurrency related, partly for, ideological reasons. They care about privacy and decentralization, and partly for practical ones. And then also, like you mentioned, we have a bunch starting to kind of develop in the regulated industry space. So we have some users that are financial institutions. We have large media outlets, some in the UK actually, that are users of our products. And the value they get is that one, I just talked about, which is kind of the trust and the confidence to know that no one else, in any circumstance would have access to the data except themselves.
And how can listeners get up and running? For anyone listening wanting to find out more information or how they can to give this a try, what's the easiest way to do that?
Yeah, that's the easiest question to answer. You can just go to skiff.com, Skiff, and you can sign up all for free. You can sign up your family, create secure email, Drive, calendar. And there's a very generous free plan if you want to use it individually or for your family, or if you want, pro and business subscriptions for an actual company.
And if I go back a few years to my IT past, there was always a few horror stories of encrypted devices that somehow people couldn't decrypt to get that information. And there's always valuable information on there and they can't get it back. For anybody listening that's got any concerns around that, let's face it, it is a case of encryption doing what it's supposed to do. But is there any safeguards on anything like that if people have got valuable information, let's say like crypto keys, etc., that they lose keys, etc.?
That's an area where there's been really great progress. And
Yeah.
as more and more people use crypto, it's getting better and better. So we'll let you add a recovery email. We'll give you a recovery PDF, just like a password manager. And you can also log in or reset your password on any device that you've previously used. And we have mobile apps for every platform. So that should make it, pretty recoverable regardless of the whatever scenario you get into. And we've gotten into all of them.
I think anybody in crypto, that's their worst nightmare. I've heard so many horror stories. And I think there's a guy over here in Wales in the UK where he had accidentally threw a hard drive away, and he paid the refuse company X amount of money. I don't think he ever found that hard drive, and it had several million on there.
Oh,
God. Could you imagine being that guy?
I don't know. It must be hard to sleep at night knowing that, or you must have nightmares about that. But the one last note I'll say is there are so many, examples in the news today of times when you're trusting an exchange and someone else with your encryption keys or your money. And in the Skiff model, the opposite is true. You only have access to your keys. So there is a little care involved, but, unfortunately, there are big benefits, and people have had to learn that the hard way too.
Yeah, and I think now more than ever, I think that's a lesson that anybody in crypto should have learned by now, and not have anything stored on exchanges, if there is anyone listening. But for yourselves, what about adoption? How are you increasing adoption and getting people to Skiff?
Another awesome question to talk about. So we're about a year old in terms of our products. They're all pretty young. We've had a few 100,000, I think about 250,000 people sign up total. And we're delivering, and sending and receiving millions of emails at this point. A lot of it has been through just the product itself, people using it, sending emails, inviting their friends. Some of it due to press and launches. We're thankful to have been in, Fast Company and The Verge and TechCrunch a bunch of times. And that just, provides an initial great user base. Then finally, some awesome partnerships as well in the privacy space and in crypto. So letting you log into Skiff with a crypto wallet, decentralizing one option for data storage, and working with, privacy companies, VPN companies, browser companies to make sure that we can all collaborate on what is a pretty shared mission.
Well, the main reason I invited you on the podcast today was to help people think differently about their options and how decentralizing office suites and communication platforms and the kind of role that they can play in privacy. And I'm conscious that we've offered a great overview for people new to your space, but I suspect there might be a few of members of your community listening, maybe hoping for a teaser on what they can expect in 2023. So for those people that have patiently listened to the end, is there anything you can share around what your big focus is going to be next year, and maybe leave everyone with a teaser or two?
Happily. Yeah, I'll share a few updates just for here. So it's an auspicious day. We just launched our calendar product this morning. And so our community members have been the first to hear about that. And we just published, an announcement about that. Calendar mobile apps are coming quite soon. And then much better tools for managing your own custom domains are also about to get released. And that's been so highly requested, working on that day and night. And for anyone who uses an email service, having your own domain is a critical piece of that, as I'm sure everyone knows.
Awesome. Well, I've loved having you on the podcast today. I'm going to try and see if there's anything we can do for you now, because some of the biggest names in business, tech, VC funding have either been guests or occasionally listened to this podcast. So I'm going to say, is there a person that you'd love to have a breakfast or lunch with, and why? And we'll send something out into the universe, and hopefully he or she might just be listening to this. But who would you choose and why?
Yeah, I think our biggest I'll make it a collective team request to be having a brunch or breakfast with Vitalik from Ethereum.
Yeah.
He's, I think, actually gave a small shout out to Skiff on his blog earlier this week. And it's just so exciting to see the Ethereum ecosystem develop with zero knowledge and, smart contracts and transactions. And so I think just figuring out how we can continue to be on the cutting edge of the technology and the usability of, a really amazing ecosystem and product would be so exciting to hear about.
Well, we'll send that out there into the ether. Let's see if we can manifest a meeting for you and your team there. But all I ask is you promise to let me know if anything materializes from that. But
will do.
For anyone listening that just wants to find out more information, dig a little bit deeper, maybe even join your community and ask a few questions there, what's the best starting point for all things Skiff?
Definitely. So I'd say go to skiff.com, sign up for our products, try them out. And then we also have a thriving Discord community, Twitter community, and Reddit community. So at the bottom of our website, we'll have links to all three of those. And, we'll respond to you as a team within minutes. We'll answer questions on Reddit. And if you tweeted us or DM us or just retweet us, we'll stay in touch there as well.
Awesome. Well, so much I've loved chatting with you today, especially around why privacy breaches in the Web 2 space are so prominent, but also thinking differently and about how decentralizing office suites and communication platforms such as email can actually be used as a weapon against attacks. And I think we're all doom scrolling down our phones and seeing attack after attack after attack. And Einstein's theory of insanity, of course, was expecting different results from the same approach time and time again. So I love what you're doing here. I'd love to see how this evolves. But more than anything, just thank you for sitting down and sharing your story with me today.
My pleasure. Thank you so much for having me.
Once again, so many big talking points, so much food for thought, and so many big areas that we can talk about beyond this podcast. And you've heard from Andrew, you've heard from me today. I don't have the answers, but I know there's so many experts out there and so many different communities that are passionate about this space. And I'd love to get the thoughts, experience, ideas outside of your head and onto this podcast too. So please email me, techblogwriter@outlook.com, Twitter, LinkedIn, Instagram at Neil C. Hughes if you've got anything you'd like to share with me. But that's it for today. I've got another great guest lined up tomorrow. We're going to explore a completely different industry about how technology is transforming our lives, work, or even world, and hopefully try and demystify some of that tech along the way. So a big thank you for listening as always. And until next time, don't be a stranger.